With the rapid advancement in technology, we constantly find ourselves relying on cell phones to make it through the day. According to a research conducted by Common Sense Media, the average child 8 years and younger spend on their cell phones had tripled in the past 4 years. And 42% children reported owning their own cell phones. Over time, this number continues to rise. My purpose today is to inform you on whether or not a children's usage of smartphones should be limited. As with most of you here today, I have a child who will grow up in society dominated by technology. The time I spent on my phone never once crossed my mind until last year, when I discovered the average time a child spends on their phone is two hours or more. With this statistic in mind, I spent many sleepless nights pondering, when my son gets older, what limitations and restrictions will I put on his smartphone. As new parents, we constantly worry about the time restrictions we put on our children's daily activities and how it will affect them later on in life. After today, I trust that you will consume a sufficient amount of information that will allow you to reach a formidable verdict regarding smartphone limitations. I will begin by discussing a few smartphone statistics and conclude with setting limitations. With our roadmap in place, let's begin with statistics. Statistics associated with the average age a child receives their first smartphone are shocking. To begin, according to a survey conducted by Pew Research Center, roughly 95% of all Americans own a cell phone. Out of that number, 77% of Americans own a smartphone. That's an increase of a whopping 35% since the past few previous surveys conducted. In addition, the average age a child receives their first cell phone is 10 years of age. This means children have access to social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, before they're old enough to receive their driver's or worker's permit. With these shocking statistics in mind, let's look at setting limitations. The setting limitations associated with children's smartphone usage falls into two major categories. The first category is parental control options, which include monitoring and restricting certain smartphone functions. Although there are many types of parental control apps available to download, the best option is to always use the internal phone settings or just call the cell phone provider. All smartphones have a password-protected parent control setting where you can limit text messaging, phone call, internet access, and app downloading. The second category is parental reinforcement, which includes setting positive examples and teaching proper phone etiquette. Although children mirror their parents' behavior, which means if you expect them to act a certain way, you have an obligation to do so yourself. If you require your children to not use their smartphone at dinner time, you should set the example by not using it during that designated time as well. In conclusion, limiting smartphone usage is essential to protecting our children. Let's review what we learned today. First, we learned that the statistics associated with children receiving their first smartphone is shocking because the average age is 10 years. Next, we learned that the setting limitations associated with children's smartphone usage falls into two different categories: parental control options, such as monitoring or restricting certain cell phone functions, and parental reinforcement, such as setting a good example and teaching proper phone etiquette. As new parents, we go above and beyond the call to protect our children's future. After today, knowing what we just learned, we no longer have to worry about our children and what they're being exposed to. Armed with the new knowledge, we can now not only set good examples for our children, but we can also set limitations on their smartphones.